Hello my friends, it's me, Madame Macabre, and I am back again with another Monday storytime video. See, I spent some time with my parents this weekend, and they were telling me the woes of their struggles with their crazy neighbors, and it just came to me that I never told you guys about the crazy neighbors. And we ain't just talking your regular brand of crazy. See, I got to have some experiences with this myself because these people actually moved in next door to us before I was done with school and moved out. So I got to witness that firsthand, and oh boy, was it a trip. It's hard to say where to begin because there's just so much garbage. But I think I will go all the way back to the point where, right as they were moving in. See, for the longest time, I was very close friends with the daughter of our old next door neighbors. And I moved into my family moved into that home when I was about 10 years old. And the neighbor's daughter was like 8.5, 9. So we got along really well. And we sort of grew up together and were really close friends, but eventually the good times had to end because they needed to move away to a bigger house and sell their old one. And we're thinking, okay, well, it's sad to see our friends go, but hopefully we'll get some nice new neighbors because, we had such a good relationship with the old neighbors. We literally, when we redid the fence dividing our properties in the backyards, my dad put in an actual gate in between so we could just go between each other's backyards easily because we hung out all the time and we were super close. Our parents were super close. They had a son too who was close with my brother. It was great. It was a very good neighborly connection going on. And I don't know, maybe it was because we had it too good with the old neighbors that we should have known a storm was a-coming. But oh boy, a storm came. See, from the get-go, things didn't seem overly suspicious with these folks. Just little red flags here and there as to the horrors that were about to ensue. See, a new family moved into the home, and they also had a daughter and son who were quite a bit younger. So by the point they moved in, I was maybe going on 14 or 15. And the daughter was maybe 12, and the son was 10. So the ceiling's yelling at me. Anyway, they moved in, and we tried our best to be very neighborly. We welcomed them in. We went over and said hello. And on the day when we walked over, said hello, our parents were talking out in the front yard, and the daughter came out and invited me in. We talked for a little while, and she didn't seem too terribly off just yet. But she invited me in to see her room, which was weird because I was super familiar with this house already because for the past 4 or 5 years, I'd been going over there nonstop, just as much as my own home practically. And her room was where my old, very close friend's room was. And it was very different because my close friend was what you could call a normal teenager with normal teenage things. This girl, 12 and a half, go back to her room, and we walk in, and it was nothing I'd ever seen with this room before. The walls had previously been painted a fun pink color and just full of posters and stuff. The walls were now stark, sterile white. There was nothing on the walls, but just shelf after shelf after shelf of these creepy porcelain baby dolls. Just tons of them filling the entire room, which if you know me, that is my worst nightmare because I do not like porcelain dolls. They give me the heebie-jeebies. So going into what I had previously felt as I had so many sleepovers over there and hung out in this room so often, and then to see it stripped of everything I was familiar with, turned sterile hospital white, and filled with these creepy, ugly porcelain baby dolls with the spooky eyes that are follow you wherever you go. It was a very uncomfortable experience for me. Anyway, I kind of sat in there awkwardly for a little while she went around the room telling me the name of all her little dolls. They all had really specific and not child sounding names, Meredith, Susanna, going around one by one, all these Guinevere, each one of these baby dolls, the creepy eyes and the creepy painted details and all that stuff. And I just wanted to leave, but I didn't want to also be rude because like these are the new neighbors, and how do I tell them, you know, like, yo, your room terrifies me, your doll collection terrifies me, you terrify me, I would like to leave. Because she did not act like a normal 12-year-old at this point. Like, it's kind of hard to explain, like, she was very monotone almost. You expect like little 12-year-olds to be excitable and stuff, not like, hi, welcome to my room, these are my baby dolls. It was a bit spooky. I love spooky stuff, but like living through this kind of spooky is not so fun. Not so fun, let me tell you. So basically, I was just kind of uncomfortably, yeah, oh, that's really cool, that's really interesting, that's really nice, oh, that's a nice name, Just waiting and hoping that my parents would call me back out, that it was time to go. And finally, I heard my mom calling me, and I was like, oh, yeah, that's my mom. I gotta run back home. Thanks for showing me your dolls. Bye. And then I took off and went back with my parents, went back home, and I don't know, my parents sort of they've told me now that I'm older, that they got a really off vibe from the parents as well. It's funny because now that I'm an adult, I get to have much more like real talk with my own parents, and you start to learn interesting things and how they really feel about things when they're not shielding you as their young child, or teenager in my case then. Anyway, I told them about the baby dolls, and they're like, well, that's a little different, but you know, we shouldn't, they seem a little different, but it might just be us being biased because we were so close with the old neighbors. Let's give them a chance. And let me just tell you that was the first and last time I ever went over to that house since my previous good neighbors left. I never went back after that, and things with those new neighbors, that was, we'll say that was the first and last time there was anything remotely hospitable or civil between us, because the stuff started happening shortly after that. See, it started out with something a little small, but it grew over time into something massive. See, I think they still have it, this poor dog that they never let it inside the house. They keep it in the backyard at all times. And like, yeah, I know some people are like, well, they're just animals or whatever. I personally think animals are a member of your family, but that's just me. And I know there's people who are like, yeah, as long as you provide them shelter and whatever, like if it's a farm dog or something, whatever. But these people would leave it out in the yard and it would just howl and cry nonstop. This was the beginning of where we had problems, because you see, it was so loud, whining and crying, and because they would not let it inside, even overnight. And okay, we're in the Pacific Northwest. It gets very, very cold, and this was not a cold weather breed of dog. It was like some kind of golden retriever mix, but it had shorter hair, and I felt bad for it because it looked like it was cold, and they just would leave it out overnight, and it gets freezing, we get snow, it gets very cold up here in the winter, and they moved in during the winter months. Anyway, so this dog would howl and whine and cry. So my parents tried to be civil, and they, the next day when they saw them out doing yard work, I believe it was the dad who was out raking, and so my dad tried to have a conversation with him like, hey, you know, I noticed that your dog was sort of howling and crying all last night. You know, is it sick? Oh, no, it does that. Oh, well, maybe it's cold. Maybe you should let it in and it won't do that. No, we don't let it in the house. So my dad was a little bit befuddled, but he kept trying to keep this conversation going. You know, well, it's keeping my kids awake, they have school, it's keeping my wife awake, it's kind of a problem. And that is where our issues with them began, because at that point, by raising there being a problem with the dog screaming and barking all night because it's freezing and miserable, we, I guess, enacted open warfare upon them, because, oh boy, I feel like, in retrospect, the dad just was like sad and miserable, being controlled by the domineering ogre of a woman that was the wife. Because while my dad was talking to the dad over there, She comes, boom! She was wearing one of those long, like, denim skirts and, like, the polo shirts, and her hair pulled back in a bun, never any makeup. You would assume she was maybe part of some religious group, but their cars were always there on Sundays. They never left, so I think they might just had a weird thing about modesty with them. Anyway, just to give you a mental picture on this woman dressed like that, very large, like, brawny, heavy-set woman with, like, permanently set scowl on her face. And, like, I don't know, she just unsettled me a little bit. She had these little beady black eyes. Anyway, she saw my dad having a conversation with her husband, and she just started shrieking at my dad. Are you giving my husband trouble? You are on our property. Who do you think you are? Are you a madman? What is wrong with you? Get off of my property. And my dad is just like, what the heck? So he starts backing away from their front yard. He was just trying to be friendly. She takes the rake away from her husband and wields it like she's gonna hit my dad. So at this point, he's like, whoa, and he like skedaddles back to our property. And oh boy, that was when stuff started to get real. So a little bit of time passes and nothing really happens, so we're thinking, okay, that was frickin' weird, but maybe that's all that there's gonna be of it. We'll just leave them alone, and they'll leave us alone, because the dog did eventually stop crying. I think maybe because it was in a new property, it was hoping that if it, you know, cried hard enough, they might have mercy on it, but eventually it realized that they had no hearts or souls, and they were just gonna leave it out there. So it stopped crying, and we were fine, okay? We left them alone, they left us alone. And that's when the interesting things started to happen. See, my family has never owned a dog. We've only ever had cats that are indoor cats. No outdoor pets, no dogs. It was nearing the end of winter as spring was beginning. My dad was out starting to do some yard work. I was hanging out in the backyard because the sun was out for once. And so the way the yards are set up, it's, the neighbor's deck can sort of see over the fence because it's a raised deck. So the wife was out there on the deck. She spotted my dad doing yard work, and then we just hear this piercing, "Hey, you!" And like, we're like, what? And we look over and it's her on the deck. She's looking at us. She goes, "You, I know what you did." And we're like, excuse me? "You threw your dog poop in my yard. I know it was you. I saw you." Mind you, again, we never had a dog. And we don't have any outdoor pets that would poop in the backyard. They have a dog that does poop in their yard, but she assumes the dog poop in her yard is not from her own dog, but from us, the neighbors who do not have a dog. So my dad tells her, we don't have a dog. I'm sorry that you're thinking this, but we don't have a dog. We don't have any animals to do this. And she just gave us the, "I know what you did," and like scuttled back inside and slid the glass sliding door and like looked at us before closing the little Venetian blind things. And oh my God, we're just thinking, oh no, now what? This can't be good at this point. And it wasn't, because let me tell you, about 2 days later, when my dad was out mowing the lawn, he discovered that they had started launching their dog crap into our yard, all over the place, like they had been chucking it over the fence. These people are not well. They're not well. So we were in complete disbelief because what the hell just happened? So they've started flinging dog turds into our yard because she perceived us as doing it first when we didn't even have a dog. Oh boy, my mom starts getting really upset and, you know, what can we do? What can we do about this? You know, we tried to be nice and all this stuff. I don't know with these people. And, you know, we're like, well, my dad was just like, okay, I'll just clean this up, and then if I don't retaliate, maybe they'll back off and leave us alone. And of course, because the woman is absolutely nuts, she didn't. She just moved on to new forms of warfare. See, the next wave of attack was using sound. They installed this massive stereo system in their backyard on their deck, and they had the speakers in the subwoofers pointed toward our house, and they would, from like 9 to midnight on school nights, blast this low frequency bass music at our house. We tried calling the police, but because we weren't living in like a gated neighborhood, they're like, oh no, there's no sound ordinance, there's nothing we can do. So yeah, the police in that area aren't so helpful. But moving on, so they kept doing this, and my parents are talking about moving. It's starting to just like cause absolute mayhem over here. It was so bad because I remember my bedroom was the closest to their property, so I got the full force of the waves. And I remember waking up one night going, well, maybe if I record this and I can show it to the police and maybe they'll do something. So I go out onto the deck, and I'm getting my camera ready in the dark, and I'm getting ready to get a shot of this low frequency bass so I can at least pick up noise, some music, because it was ridiculously loud. But I heard movement. So I, trying to be, sneaky by this point, like definitely 15 by this point, year old, get closer to the fence and kind of look between the cracks. Mind you, by the way, they had already sealed that old gate in between the yards. They had like put massive padlocks in it and stuff because, I don't know, they thought we were gonna sneak in and plant more dog poop or something, I don't know. Anyway, I was peeking through the slats, and the mother, she was out in the backyard with a shovel, like digging something. And this was really bizarre because it was the middle of the night, and this scared me. So like I basically just ran back inside as quietly as I could, like slid the door, locked it, and then just tried to go to bed, earplugs and all that stuff, tried to block it out as best I could. And then in the morning, I told my dad about that, like, did you know the mom was out there at about 11 o'clock at night digging something in her backyard? And my dad's just like, the heck? Our neighbors are the frickin' Klopeks. Now, for a lot of you guys who were younger, there was this movie called The Burbs, where there were some crazy neighbors called the Klopeks, and at one point in the movie, they're out with like pickaxes digging in their backyard in the middle of the night. Thus, that's how our next door neighbors got the term the Klopeks from my dad. So whenever he's referring to that, he's not even referring to the movie anymore, he's referring to they're still current neighbors. So at this point, I'm super sketched out by these people. Mind you, this stuff continues happening year after year until I am done with high school. Mind you, not everything was as intense because they'd get sort of bored because we stopped reacting. We were miserable, but we stopped reacting. And when they weren't getting the reaction they wanted, they sort of decided to try something new. And certain things worked better than others. This is the thing. The Klopeks here, they were at war with everyone in the neighborhood. Nobody likes them. And the funny thing is, when they first moved in, they're like, yeah, we moved from our old neighborhood because we had trouble with our neighbors. We just couldn't get along. They were terrible people. Yeah, now we know what the trouble is. It's you. Oh boy, you guys. Like, they were paranoid and weird. Like, they installed this massive electronic gate in front of like their little one-story house that was not impressive in any way. So you've got this big cast iron electronic gate, like their little fortress. And oh goodness, they did some loopy stuff. I think what ended up saving my parents, they're still kind of on the fence about moving, because every now and then the Klopeks do a little bit weird things. But it was the neighbors across the street from them. We're side by side to them, but there was neighbors right across the street from them. They decided they didn't like their teenage son. They decided he was eyeing their daughter inappropriately. Mind you, I knew this guy for years. Super sweet, wouldn't hurt a fly, wouldn't ever do anything like that. But he was eyeing them inappropriately. So they turned their attention to the family across the street and started harassing them. I think ultimately what they did is they got this massive, huge, bright light that they installed at the front of their house, shining into the windows of the house across the street. And the neighbors across, they tried their best. They installed like light blocking windows and stuff to try and help. But ultimately, their son just like, he didn't feel safe living there anymore because the mom had made some pretty ugly threats. And they ended up moving. So basically, I'm pretty sure they're still at war with other people in the neighborhood, but the focus is no longer on my parents or my home. But wowee, like, you hear stories about bad neighbors, but these are the real deal, the Klopeks. They're like an alien species that's just trying their best to human and they're not doing it well. My neighbors here may occasionally play their music too loud or stomp around or do things that are minorly inconvenient, but, you know, having this experience with the Klopeks, I've got some perspective. Maybe that's why my fuse is a little bit longer with little noise things, because I've encountered such hell that I can appreciate when my neighbors are not certifiable. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed that true story. And I hope you have never had to experience something quite as traumatizing as those neighbors. But have you had neighbors similar to this? Have you had some that are maybe not quite as bad but have done weird things? Have you had some that are worse? Please, by all means, feel free to share in the comments below. I would love to read your crazy neighbor experiences. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and a comment below. I always really appreciate it. But once again, that is all for now. I will catch you guys all next time. Bye-bye.